Let's be real for a second. You've been showing up consistently. You're the one initiating, the one planning, the one making sure the connection stays alive. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you keep telling yourself, if I just keep going, if I just show her how much I care, eventually it'll click for her. But it doesn't click. It gets worse. She pulls back more, responds less. And you're sitting there genuinely confused because you're doing everything right on paper. Then one day, exhausted, frustrated, maybe a little defeated, you stop. Not as a plan, not because you read some advice online. You just run out of steam, and something strange happens. She notices. Not right away, but she notices. That moment right there is what we're breaking down today. And I promise by the end of this, you're going to understand something about human psychology that most people spend years learning the hard way. Quick shout out. If you're new here at PsyCraft Daily, we don't do surface level advice. We go into the actual psychology behind why people behave the way they do, so you can make smarter decisions with that understanding. Now, let's get into it. Here's a scenario that's going to sound familiar to a lot of people. Kevin meets someone. Let's call her Diane. The first few weeks are natural, easy, genuinely fun. He's relaxed. She's engaged. The chemistry feels real. But then Kevin starts to like her a little more than he's comfortable admitting, and something in him shifts. He starts measuring. Is she texting back as fast? Did that conversation feel off? Is she losing interest? And because he's a good guy who genuinely cares, he responds to that anxiety the only way that seems logical, by doing more effort, more attention, more making himself available. Diane starts to pull back, not because Kevin is a bad person, not because she doesn't like him, but because the energy coming from him has completely changed. What was once calm and attractive is now loaded with invisible weight. Every interaction carries a quiet question underneath it. Are we okay? Do you still want this? Think about this from Diane's side for a moment. She went from being drawn to someone who seemed genuinely comfortable in his own skin to feeling like she's somehow responsible for his emotional state. That's a heavy thing to walk into, and most people, not just women, anyone, will subconsciously create distance from that kind of pressure. Here's what the research actually backs up. Psychologists have studied what they call anxious attachment behaviors in early relationships. And one consistent finding is that when one person's emotional stability becomes dependent on the other person's reactions, it creates an imbalance that erodes attraction over time, regardless of how genuine the feelings are. In other words, your feelings aren't the problem. How those feelings are expressing themselves might be. Here's where it gets interesting. The same caring, the same investment, the same genuine desire for connection can come from two completely different internal places. One is grounded. One is anxious. And people feel the difference even when they can't explain why. Every interaction you have sends a signal, not a signal you choose consciously. A signal your internal state broadcasts automatically. When you're in that anxious pursuit mode, checking your phone more than you'd like to admit, replaying conversations, wondering what she meant by that short reply, you're sending a signal that says, my sense of self is tied to your response. And that signal, at a deep psychological level, reads as instability. Now, here's the part that might sting a little. Instability isn't attractive. Not because people are shallow, but because at a very primal level, humans are drawn toward people who seem like they'd be okay, regardless of circumstances. There's safety in that. There's something compelling about someone who isn't rattled by uncertainty. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. Two guys walk into the same situation. A woman they're interested in takes 3 hours to reply to a message. Guy A spirals, overthinks it, sends a follow-up, maybe even makes a self-deprecating joke to relieve the tension he created. Guy B notices the delay, moves on with his afternoon, and replies when he actually has something to say. Same situation, completely different internal responses. And if you've ever been around both types of people in a social setting, you can feel the difference without anyone saying a word. The guy who isn't rattled seems more interesting, more confident, more worth pursuing. This isn't performance. You can't manufacture that kind of calm by pretending. It has to come from a genuine place of knowing your own value, which is exactly why the real shift happens when a man stops chasing and starts living. So, what do you do with this? Start paying attention to your motivations before you act. Before you send that next message, before you suggest those plans, pause for 5 seconds and honestly ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I'm trying to manage my anxiety about where things stand? The answer will change what you do next. Our brains don't process consistency the same way they process change. Think about background noise. If you live near a busy road, you stop hearing the traffic after a while. It becomes part of the environment. Your brain filters it out. But the morning that road is unexpectedly quiet, you notice immediately. The absence is louder than the sound ever was. The same principle applies to attention and presence in relationships. When you've been consistently available, always the first to reach out, always the one making things happen, your presence becomes the background noise. It's expected. It's ambient. It stops registering as something special and starts registering as something that's just there. And then you stop, or even just pull back noticeably. The silence hits different. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever managed to be. Psychologists call this the contrast effect. We don't evaluate things in isolation. We evaluate them relative to what came before. The warmth of a sunny day feels more intense after a cold week. A meal tastes better when you've been hungry. And your value becomes more vivid when it's no longer something she can take for granted. Now, and this is critical, this isn't an argument for playing games. Deliberately going silent to manipulate someone's feelings is a short-term tactic with long-term consequences. People eventually see through it, and whatever reconnection it creates is built on a shaky foundation. What we're talking about is different. We're talking about what happens when a man genuinely redirects his energy back toward his own life. When the absence is real because he's actually building something, reconnecting with people he drifted from, getting back to work he cares about. That version of withdrawal doesn't feel manipulative when she senses it. It feels like growth. And growth is one of the most attractive things a person can witness in someone they're already drawn to. So, what do? Give your absence some actual content. Fill the space with things that matter to you. Not to look busy, to actually be engaged with your own life. The difference in your energy will be tangible. Let's get specific because vague advice is useless. When a woman is evaluating her feelings about someone, consciously or not, there are 3 things she's reading constantly. Not his bank account, not his height, not even his looks in the way most men assume. She's reading his relationship with himself. The first thing she's reading is how he handles uncertainty. Does he become reactive when things feel unclear? Does he need constant reassurance? Or can he sit with not knowing and remain fundamentally steady? A man who can tolerate ambiguity without spiraling communicates something extremely powerful, that his emotional foundation doesn't depend on external conditions. That quality becomes more attractive the longer you're around it. The second thing she's reading is whether he has a direction, not a destination, a direction. There's a meaningful difference. A destination is a fixed achievement. A direction is an ongoing orientation toward growth, toward purpose, toward something beyond the present moment. Men who are building things, a skill, a business, a body of creative work, a community, carry a very different energy than men whose primary focus is the relationship itself. Ironically, the less the relationship is your entire world, the more she wants to be part of yours. The third thing is how he responds to her. Not just what he says, but the quality of his attention when he's present. A man who has genuinely reclaimed his own life brings a different kind of presence to the moments he does show up. He's not distracted by anxiety. He's not performing. He's actually there. And that kind of presence, rare, genuine, unhurried, is something most people are starving for. Think about this carefully. All three of these things are byproducts of a man who has stopped making someone else's approval the center of his universe. They don't come from tactics. They come from a fundamental reorientation of where you're putting your energy. So, what do? Pick one of these three and be brutally honest about where you stand with it right now. Not where you want to be, where you actually are. That honesty is your starting point. Let's walk through this from the other side of the equation. When a woman has been receiving consistent pursuit from someone, and that pursuit suddenly and genuinely stops, her brain does something fascinating. It doesn't immediately think, oh, good, space. It goes into a quiet kind of evaluation mode. She starts to wonder what changed, whether she did something, whether he's moved on to someone else, whether she underestimated what she had. That last one is the one that matters most. There's a concept in behavioral economics called loss aversion. The idea that the pain of losing something is psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of gaining it. We fight harder to keep what we already have than we ever fought to get it in the first place. The man she took for granted, the one who was always there, suddenly feels like something she might lose. And that reframing changes everything about how she sees him. Now, let me be straight with you here. This dynamic doesn't guarantee anything. Some women, when a man pulls back, will simply move forward without looking back. And that's actually valuable information. It tells you the connection wasn't strong enough to support what you wanted. And no amount of strategy was ever going to change that. You can't pursue your way into a genuine, mutual connection. Either the foundation is there or it isn't. But when there is a real foundation, when she genuinely was attracted but got comfortable, the shift in energy can absolutely reignite something real. The critical variable is authenticity. If she reaches out and finds the same anxious, approval-seeking version of you waiting on the other side, nothing will have actually changed. But if she finds someone who has genuinely grown, who's warmer but less needy, more present but less available for anything and everything, that version of you becomes genuinely compelling in a new way. Let that land for a moment. The goal was never to make her chase you. The goal was always to become someone worth choosing, by her, and just as importantly, by yourself. Real talk. Everything we've covered comes down to one uncomfortable truth, the shift that makes women notice, the one that creates that contrast, that projects genuine confidence, that makes your absence loud, cannot be manufactured through strategy. It is the natural consequence of doing the internal work that most men avoid because it's harder than sending one more text. That work looks like this. It looks like sitting with the discomfort of not knowing where things stand and choosing to build your life anyway. Not because you're playing a game, because your life deserves your full attention regardless of what she decides. It looks like reconnecting with the parts of yourself that got buried while you were focused on her. Your friendships, your physical health, the project you put on hold, the hobby that used to make you lose track of time. These aren't distractions from the relationship. They're the foundations of the person the relationship would actually be worth having. It looks like developing what psychologists call an internal locus of control, a genuine belief that your sense of purpose and direction comes from within rather than from external validation. People with a strong internal locus are consistently rated as more attractive, more trustworthy, and more capable of building lasting relationships. Not because it's a strategy, because it's a fundamentally healthy way to move through the world. Here's something worth sitting with. The version of you that doesn't need her approval is also the version of you that she's most likely to genuinely want. There's no irony there. It's just how human psychology works. We are drawn to completeness. We are drawn to people who would be whole without us, because choosing someone like that actually means something. So, what do you do right now, today, with all of this? You stop waiting for the relationship situation to resolve before you start living. You make one decision this week that is entirely for you. Not to impress her, not to seem busy, not to create mystery. Something that matters to you for its own sake. One thing. And you build from there. We started with a man who stopped reaching out, not because he had a plan, but because he was tired. And something unexpected happened. But the deeper takeaway isn't about her texting back. It's about what stopping revealed to him. That so much of his energy had drifted away from his own life and into the orbit of someone else's approval. And when he pulled that energy back, he didn't just become more attractive. He became more himself. That's the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. Yes, women often do notice when a man genuinely stops chasing. Yes, that shift in energy creates a real psychological effect that can change the dynamic. But the man who benefits most from that shift, the one who shows up differently on the other side, isn't doing it to get her back. He's doing it because somewhere in the exhaustion of overinvesting, he remembered that his life is worth showing up for. And that realization, that quiet, firm decision to reclaim his own direction, is what actually changes everything, not just with her, with every room he walks into after that.